The Prix Galien is a welcome initiative to stimulate creative research and promote excellence. Barack Obama. The Galien Awards ceremony is considered the equivalent of the Oscars night for the innovators in the labs and awards every year the best pharmaceutical product, the best biotechnology product, the best medical technology, and the best digital health product.
This is the right event, on the right issue, at the right time.
I thank His Excellency, the President, for bringing Prix Galien to Africa, and I look forward to the day when we will celebrate an African winner of the Prix Galien.
I'm particularly grateful to receive this award.
The awards are among the highest honors in science and commerce because they lead to improvement in the human condition.
The Prix Galien Awards recognize the world's brightest minds and most innovative companies. They are a true celebration of the hard work required to produce life-changing interventions.
That is what makes us optimistic about the future.
Congratulations to all of you.
Make a difference. Join the Galien Foundation. The Galien Week of Innovation has been made possible thanks to our precious friends and partners who share the Galien Foundation's values. First off, the two exclusive platinum partners are We would now like to acknowledge our two gold partners. Furthermore, we proudly introduce our corporate leaders partners. The associate partners are the grantors are To conclude, we are extremely fortunate to work with outstanding media partners who have contributed to the Galien Foundation's renown.
Thank you. I'd like to get us started. We're going to do in the best MedTech category, which is our focus today. We'll be holding 3 webinars due to the large number of products representing this important field. This particular webinar in the hour we have allotted is devoted to 5 nominees in the medical devices and implants, other therapeutic areas category. What we'll cover today relates to the central question: what is MedTech innovation doing for patients with highly specialized needs for treatment? With this in mind, we'll look closely at devices and systems that stake out new ground in treating various ophthalmology disorders, COPD and lung disease, and even the evolving dentistry of root canals. We'll also have time for audience questions, and those questions can be forwarded to the moderator using the link provided on your screen. But before starting our panel discussion, and I thought we'd have a quick poll. And so if we could put that poll up. So people could take a look at it, and this will be up the whole time while we're having our discussion. So if people could answer those, that would be wonderful during the meeting. So we're going to have 5 different outstanding people go over some different questions I'll ask, and I'll actually introduce each one, but I'll also as I do that I'll ask questions. So first, I'm going to start with Frank Lavalier, who's the Senior Vice President and Head of Global Research and Development for Alcon. And they've developed a novel trifocal intraocular lens. And of course, Alcon's been a very, very successful ophthalmology company. And I thought just to start, if I could ask Frank, what do you see? Has there been what measurable impact can you cite on clinical outcomes for patients with your product? And what has been the clinician and patient response to the product so far?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Langer. Well, actually, with PanOptix, we tried to design an intraocular lens, which is a tiny artificial lens for the eye that replaces the eye's natural lens that is removed during the cataract surgery. We tried to design a lens that addresses really the limitation of the current intraocular lenses, where the patient who undergo cataract surgery still need glasses for near or intermediate vision after surgery. So that's why we went into developing a trifocal intraocular lens. The clinical results are actually amazing. With our lens, we could reach 20/20 near, intermediate, and distance vision. And also our analysis from the clinical studies we performed showed that at least 9 out of 10 patients implanted with this lens can be expected to achieve complete spectacle independence, which is really a great proof of how this technology delivers on its promise. The clinical results also show that 99.2% of the patients say they would have the same PanOptix lens implanted again, and 98% of people with the lens also reported that they would recommend this lens to family and friends, which is a clear measure of patient satisfaction after lens implantation. The surgeons, they have also expressed very high satisfaction with the visual outcomes they are seeing in their patients. And they feel this lens is a game changer and that the IOL fits into their clinic practice very naturally. And it fills the gap that has been missing all these years, namely a continuous range of high quality vision from far all the way to near.
Well, thank you very, very much. We'll come back and ask you more later. So next I wanted to introduce Narinder Shargil, who's the Vice President of Medical at Pulmonx, and they've developed a very novel bronchial valve. And I'd like to ask Narinder, why did you and your company choose to focus on this particular disease state and the indication associated with the product, and how significant was the level of unmet medical need?
Thank you, Professor Langer. Yes, so we focused on COPD, which is the third leading cause of death worldwide. In the United States, emphysema, which is a phenotype of COPD, affects more than 3.5 million people and more than double that globally. Even though COPD is one of the leading causes of death, it does not receive the same funding or attention as some of the other diseases. And so there is a need for some innovation in treating this unmet need. Until the Zephyr valves were developed, there was no good options for patients who continue to struggle to breathe despite taking optimal medications and using supplemental oxygen. So only choices available to these patients were either to have lung volume reduction surgery to reduce the hyperinflation of the lungs, or ultimately lung transplantation, which obviously has its limitations in terms of availability of donor organs. So the Zephyr valves were developed as the first minimally invasive option to cause atelectasis of one of the lobes of the lung, which actually helps then the rest of the healthier lung to function better. And it improves, based on multiple randomized clinical trials, our data showed that this improves lung function, quality of life, and exercise capacity in these patients. So simple things like, brushing one's teeth, working in the garden, playing with the children, going upstairs becomes a real problem for these patients. And our treatment has helped to improve this and the quality of life of these patients. My favorite stories are a grandma who was able to go, swim with the dolphins with our granddaughter, or the story of a gentleman who his only wish was to be able to walk his daughter down the aisle when she got married without having to drag his oxygen tank with him. So we've made that kind of a difference in these patients. And certainly the physicians who treat these patients tell us all the time how it has made a tremendous difference in the option that they can offer to their patients.
Well, thank you very, very much. Let me go to Barbara next. I'll introduce Barbara Fant, who's the president of Clinical Research Consultants, and they've been developing a novel artificial iris. And I was gonna maybe ask a few questions if you wouldn't mind. And Barbara, what challenges did your company confront in transitioning from early proof of concept to human subject testing and ultimately to market authorization? And are there any lessons from your experience that might add to a better public understanding and awareness of the medical innovation process? And also, are there separate MedTech device approval tracks at the FDA? Do they still fit for purpose?
Thank you, Professor Langer. So developing the custom flex artificial iris to bring it to commercialization, there were a number of challenges that we faced. And to understand those challenges, first, let me tell you a little bit about the artificial iris device and about the population, because those two factors created a number of the challenges that we had to overcome. So the custom flex artificial iris is the world's first and only FDA-approved treatment for aniridia. Aniridia is an eye disorder with complete or partial absence of the iris, which is the colored part of the eye around the pupil. And the iris controls the amount of light that enters the eye. So patients who have aniridia or suffer from aniridia may be born without irises. That occurs in about 1 to 50,000 to 100,000 babies that are born annually in the US. And that can be due to a chromosomal defect or other conditions, or it can be from acquired eye defects such as injury or trauma. So sports-related blunt injuries, baseballs, soccer balls, penetrating objects that poke or strike the eye, fish hooks, bungee cords are common in youth and adults. And these can result in iris defects and trauma and injury to the iris. And because the eye is so delicate, these injuries that may not affect other parts of the body can severely damage the iris and other parts of the eye. As you can imagine, someone who has a damaged iris, when you look at someone and you look at their eyes and you see the color in their eyes, I think we all look, oh, they have such attractive blue eyes, or their green eyes, or their hazel eyes. Imagine that just the discomfort that these patients have, not only from the physical aspects of having an extraordinary amount of light enter the eye, but also the cosmesis and having a damaged iris, in which one eye may look totally normal and the other eye is a big black hole, much larger than a normal pupil, or a misshapen iris. So the natural iris plays an important part in the eye's optical system, and not only gives us their color, but as I said, it influences or controls the amount of light that enters the eye. So these patients with aniridia suffer light sensitivity, distortion, glare, loss of depth of field. It negatively affects both their psychological and social development, especially in youth and adolescents and teenagers, but also impacts their activities of daily living. So these are all challenges and things that we had to take into account when we designed the clinical trial for the custom flex artificial iris. So I want to say that the approval of the artificial iris and this whole approach, or our whole long pathway that we took to bring this product to market, was really a collaborative effort, both of the scientists that developed the artificial iris, the surgeons, the regulators, the FDA, when we worked with FDA, both in the clinical trial phase and in the approval phase, the device innovator, the manufacturer who makes the custom-made artificial iris, and the patients themselves. So the innovator and manufacturer is Human Optics. They're located in Erlangen, Germany. They're a co-nominee for this Prix Galien award. The device was designed in collaboration with Professor Koch from Germany, who performed the first implant in 2002. I first became aware of the artificial iris in around probably 2007 and contacted the company to begin discussions about bringing the device into the US. At the same time, Dr. Michael Snyder, who is a well-known and internationally respected surgeon for iris repair surgeries, had contacted Human Optics to also bring the device into the US. We coincidentally are both located here in Cincinnati, Ohio, and that began a long collaboration between the two of us and our whole team that we worked with to bring this product into the US. It took us about 3 years to convince the company to come into the US market. And that fear, when if the international companies, was a fear of the FDA, not knowing the process, not understanding the process, but also they were manufacturing in the European environment, and knowing that you're coming into the US, that ultimately leads to FDA inspection of their facilities and such. And so shoring up or coordinating all their quality system and manufacturing requirements so that they are compliant with both the European regulations and the FDA regulations was also a concern. So once we finally convinced the company to start the clinical trial and we got company approval to do so and their buy-in as a, obviously as a corporate partner in this, the second challenge was gaining regulatory approval. So we began that process in 2010. We finally worked our way through the FDA process, including doing additional biocompatibility studies and a 6-month animal study to gain additional information. When we had data on 200 patients that were implanted under compassionate use, but we still had to complete some additional animal work. So that set us back. And so that's one challenge. And I think one lesson learned is always make sure that you're in communication with FDA and you have all of your requirements in place for being able to begin your clinical trial and also to gain your approval. We also, at that time, there were 2 other iris prosthesis devices that are on the market in Europe. They were being used in the US under compassionate use, and one company had attempted to bring their device into the study, but their clinical trial failed for a number of reasons. So we knew that there was some precedence with FDA, there were some challenges with FDA, which also meant that we had a unique device that was completely different in terms of its technology, its composition, et cetera. But we also know that we have to regulate against some of the issues that came before us with that clinical trial. And lastly, we are doing a clinical trial for a rare disease, and being able to identify enough patients to include in that clinical trial was also challenging. And then third challenge in that clinical trial was our patient population. It was a very difficult patient population. They have significant other disease. And so trying to identify what are the outcome measures and how can we attribute those to the device itself? What are the adverse events? What's the safety profile? How do we attribute that to the device itself versus the disease state? Those were all issues that we had to overcome in the clinical trial design. And we were very fortunate that our FDA reviewers that we worked with and the FDA team were very knowledgeable about aniridia and the challenge before us, and they worked with us to develop a clinical trial protocol that would meet our needs and for the patients that was workable. And so we began our first study, implanted our first patient in 2013. It took us 5 years to complete the study and file our pre-market approval for the device. So we used a number of patient reported outcome measures in that clinical trial so that we could identify actually the true benefits of the device itself. And in the 447 eyes that we treated in the clinical study, over 70% reported significant decreases in light sensitivity, glare, improvement in health-related quality of life and vision, and 94% reported a high satisfaction with the post-treatment cosmetic appearance. So based on these outcomes, we received the approval for the Custom Flex Artificial Iris in 2018. And we were the first breakthrough device to achieve PMA approval. We thought that at that point that we had achieved the milestones that we needed to achieve, but the story doesn't end there, because then once we had PMA approval, we have to get this out to the marketplace, to the general, to the population. And little did we know is the reimbursement hurdles that we would face post-approval. So it's taken another 3 years to work through those post-approval reimbursement issues to get the codes that we need, so that our insurance companies and payers actually recognize that this is a much needed device and will pay for the device. I want to recognize Veo Ophthalmics, which is the distributor in the US, for all the work that they have done in working to gain those reimbursement codes and so that we can get this device out. So in summary, it was a challenging experience, but it was one of the most rewarding projects that we as a company have ever worked on. I think every person who was associated with this particular clinical trial will say that this was a passion project. It wasn't a project that it was a passion project because the surgeons, these patients that they saw, these were their most difficult patients. And they were the patients that really tugged at your heartstrings because they had no alternative for these patients before the custom flex artificial iris achieved commercial FDA approval. So we worked closely with these surgeons. There was a lot of education that went into it. There was a lot of thought and translating experiences that went into the training programs for the surgeons that are now able to get certified and implant the procedure. But it also has been a big game changer for the surgeons itself. And I think one of our surgeons, I just want to read this little, this vignette from the surgeon who said, "I had the privilege of being part of the custom flex artificial FDA trial. The silicone color matched iris prosthesis has the look and feel of an actual iris. Pictures of the unaffected iris, sometimes there's not one in aniridia, are taken and painstaking efforts are made to try and match the color and texture. The implant can be placed in the capsular bag sulcus or sutured to the scleral wall. Having the ability to use this iris prosthesis is definitely a game changer for me. Not only is the artificial iris a game changer for the surgery, it's a game changer for the patient. In some cases, even a life changer. It's not often you can get patients to shed tears of joy after surgery. The tears are not because of their improvement in vision. It's because they finally feel whole again. They're finally not feeling self-conscious or worried about people asking questions. They finally have what many doctors told them they could never have, a new iris and a new outlook on life. Or as one patient said, "My life has drastically changed. Now I feel normal." The patients are the real winners from this clinical trial. And just this custom flex artificial iris really changes lives, changes the way that patients see and are seen. And we have so many stories from patients that were in the clinical trials. We have a bride who sent us the photos from her wedding with her new irises, and she had beautiful photos. We have kids that previously had to stay indoors that are now playing soccer, swimming on the swim team, playing other sports. But most of all, we keep getting word back from these patients, "I got my life back. I now feel normal." So no matter the challenges that we had to face to get this product on the market, as I said, it was a passion project, and it was one of the most worthwhile projects that anyone involved in the project ever had the opportunity to participate in.
Well, that was terrific. Thank you so much. Well, that was really terrific. So let me move on now to Desmond Adler, who's the General Manager and Vice President of Research and Development for Corneal Health at Glaukos. And they've been developing iStent inject. And what I'd like to ask Desmond is there, again, a question I asked earlier, is there a measurable impact you can cite on clinical outcomes for patients with your product? And what has been the clinician and patient response to the product so far?
Yeah, Professor Langer, thank you very much. I'd love to speak on that topic. So it actually a lot of parallels to another Glaukos product, listening to the prior story with a kind of rare ophthalmic disease. But we're probably best known at Glaukos for our line of glaucoma products, right? So as you guys probably know, glaucoma is a very serious vision-threatening disease where we have abnormally high pressure in the eye, which over time degrades the function of the optic nerve and leads to progressive visual impairment. Very common, right? And these patients are often elderly, and they often struggle to adhere to the normal treatment regimen which is unfortunately multiple daily applications of multiple different kinds of medication, right, that act in different mechanisms to reduce the intraocular pressure, right, or the pressure of the fluid inside the eye. It really is a challenge for them for many reasons. One being the side effects of the drops, and two, just being the need to go in and put the drops in, 3, 4, 5 times a day, right? So what Glaukos has done is actually created a new category of treatments called microinvasive glaucoma surgery, or MIGS, where we implant a submillimeter device called an iStent inject, surgically implanted into the trabecular meshwork, right? What that does is it actually improves the aqueous outflow from the front of the eye and allows patients to achieve a normal eye pressure, right? Which in turn protects visual function, right? Stops that progression of the visual function loss. So speaking to impact, right? The measurable impact here really is twofold. One, it's the direct lowering of intraocular pressure, right? We get the IOP numbers down while simultaneously minimizing trauma to the very, very delicate tissues in the anterior chamber. Because these devices are so small and because they can go in through a clear corneal incision in the side of the eye, right? Very non-traumatic. And then two, right, very importantly for these patients, it can in many cases reduce the patient's need for medications as determined by their eye care professional. So if we think about response in the market, right, response from the patients, response from our physicians, as you can all imagine, in an elderly glaucoma population, the patients sincerely appreciate that reduced daily burden, right, of having to apply eye drops many times per day. And I think equally, they appreciate the peace of mind of knowing that their disease is well controlled, right? It's several less things to do during the day, and they're still protected from glaucoma progression. On the physician side, I think they appreciate, at the same time, the reduced issues around obtaining patient adherence to the drop application. And finally, I think both the patients and the physicians appreciate that these microstents, right, the iStent products, can be implanted at the time of cataract surgery, right? So while the doctor is quote unquote already in there putting in an IOL, for example, they can also at the same time put an iStent inject in and kill 2 birds with 1 stone without inducing any additional need for additional recovery, additional follow-up, right? It's all to the patient. Feels like it's one procedure. So I'd say overall, we're very proud at Glaukos to have created this new treatment category for controlling glaucoma. And we're really happy to see the impact we've had with our patients, IOP, and reduced medication burden. Thank you.
Well, thank you very, very much. So next, I'd like to introduce Claire Glockner, who's a senior staff scientist at Becton Dickinson. And she's going to talk about CureWick, which is a product that they've developed. Claire.
Yep. Thank you, Dr. Langer.
Well, before I do, let me focus it a little bit more. I apologize. So why did Becton Dickinson choose to focus on that disease state and indication associated with your product? And how significant was the level of unmet medical need?
Thanks. So again, I'm Claire Glockner from Becton Dickinson. I'm a senior staff scientist at urology and critical care in R&D. And at UCC, we are concerned with the clinical issues around the urinary tract. That is the kidneys, the bladder, and the urethra. For patients in the community, including those in a family home, an assisted living facility, skilled nursing facility, and other facilities like that, we seek to reduce clinical concerns, but we also have a strong necessity to improve the overall quality of life for our customers and their caregivers. So most of us are fortunate enough to be able to walk independently to a toilet and voluntarily empty our bladder where and when we choose. However, for those with incontinence, urine flows out on its own accord or in response to small increases in abdominal pressure that really wouldn't faze the rest of us. Many deal with unwanted urine leakage, including over 6 million women here in the US alone. Women are particularly at risk for incontinence, and in particular severe incontinence, as a consequence of developing weakness in our pelvic floor after pregnancy, as well as after advancing age. Women have also had fewer alternatives to manage urinary incontinence than men until the launch of CureWick. Although absorbent hygiene products such as adult briefs and pads have become much more widely available, those who use them are still at risk for skin infection, and urinary tract infections that result from that warm moisture being in constant contact with the intimate area in sensitive skin. 6 out of 10 home users are not satisfied with their current absorbent products that they use. And over the last 25 years, there really hasn't been much innovation in product options for either men or women. This is especially troubling given the enormous impact that severe incontinence has had to the sufferer and their caregivers' daily lives. In addition to the cost and time and money for these individuals, there's also an emotional toll from the fact that a fundamental human skill learned in early childhood has been lost. Sufferers sometimes have to rely on their own spouse or their children to be their caregiver, and this strains family relationships as well as causes embarrassment to that family caregiver, loss of sleep, and risks injury due to lifting and movement of their loved one. An opportunity to restore independence and dignity is not the least of the unmet needs in this population. Necessity is the mother of invention, and so it was for the PureWick Female External Catheter, or FEC. Dr. Camille Newton was a physician seeing patients at their homes, and on one such visit, she met Dr. Robert Sanchez, a retired chemist, who had improvised a device to help his wife. The prototype was constructed from hardware store PVC pipe with holes in it and a napkin held in place around it with rubber bands. This wrap tube was placed in the urine path and connected to a jar that was under low continuous vacuum from an aquarium pump. The low pressure in the jar caused urine to flow from the tube to the jar where it was collected for eventual disposal. Dr. Newton immediately recognized the advantages of this device and obtained his permission to commercialize it. The device was patented in 2012, and the PureWick Corporation was formed the following year. Hundreds of FEC prototypes were created, evaluated, and redesigned. To be useful in both the acute care space and home care environments, the system needed to be both effective and simple to use, even for lay people. The caregivers of elderly women are often their husbands, some with medical issues of their own, including low dexterity and low strength. The FEC and its accessories had to function simply and reliably without the need for extensive training. This device also needed to work for many different body types and sizes and in different positions, like lying down or sitting. The device was designed to be low risk, and therefore it qualified as a Class 1 exempt in the US, reducing the regulatory burden to launch it. But still, Dr. Newton's team understood the necessity of extensive testing to ensure that those who needed to use it could do so safely and reliably. This physician-driven development enabled PureWick to be rapidly evolved into an eventual final design. This development approach emphasizes the importance of a user's input, especially an intended layperson user, to improve the final product design. In 2016, the first devices were sold to a hospital for patients not requiring a Foley catheter. Sales to hospitals and home users quickly increased, and the following year, PureWick was acquired by Bard Medical, which is now part of BD. PureWick FEC and its companion product, the PureWick Urine Collection System, have been an ongoing innovation focus for our team. BD launched an improved pump in 2020 and has improved the device protection over time and to provide better access to both hospitals and community users. In BD's survey of PureWick users, home users, over 8 in 10 users sleep better with PureWick than with their previous product. Approximately 60% of PureWick users have experienced fewer urinary tract infections and skin issues, and 9 in 10 users recognize the PureWick FEC provides significant advantages versus disposable absorbent hygiene products. Particularly for long-term care facilities, this additional option is especially impactful given the high rate of bacteria and catheter-associated UTI at these facilities. Several peer-reviewed journals have been documented evidence of PureWick's impact on catheter-associated urinary tract infections. So from my personal research with PureWick users, I've learned directly of the significant impact it has had on both their health and quality of life. I've talked to a daughter who was able to bring her mother home to live with her and her father from a skilled nursing facility simply because she could take care of her mother's incontinence herself with the use of PureWick. Another woman I've spoken to was able to be alone throughout the night without a constant paid caregiver because she no longer had to get up at night to use the toilet, which was a significant fall risk for her. PureWick has benefited many families enduring severe urinary incontinence, and we hope many more in the future. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you all very, very much. Those are great answers and really terrific work. So what I thought I'd do now is like have a more open discussion, and I'll maybe ask a question which all of you can answer. But if you have questions you'd like to ask each other, that would be great too. And then we'll go to audience questions and feedback. So a question I'd maybe like to ask each of you is, as scientists and clinicians, where do you see the next wave of innovations trending in your individual product area? Anyone can start. We could go in reverse order. Claire, I don't know if you'd like to start or.
Sure. Yeah, sure. So at UCC, we have a long-standing history with urology, obviously, starting with the Foley catheter over 100 years ago. We've developed a lot of technologies around urine handling, really, and urine management. And I think that we pushed that in the last few years. We pushed that more and more into the home environment. I think that trend for us will continue. And I think that is something that users we've seen in the last few years. We've seen more and more healthcare be pushed into closer to home, from hospitals into surgery centers, from surgery centers into the doctor's office. I think the same thing is going to happen with more routine surgeries and more routine care, especially in management of chronic conditions, of which severe urinary incontinence and also its opposite issue, urinary retention, are two of those. So I see that we will take a more active role in helping those patients to regain normalcy in their lives.
Thank you very much. Would someone else like to answer, or should I call on people? Whatever you'd like to do.
Sure. I can take a stab.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
So the one-way valves that we developed are implanted bronchoscopically in the lobe of the lung that you want to occlude. And the problem with that is that it only works in patients that actually have no collateral channels. Because if you block the airway, if you block the lobe, where you're trying to prevent air from going in and allowing the trapped air to escape, if you have collateral channels, you will continue to feed that lobe. So our device only works in patients that have no collateral ventilation. Our company's done a great job in developing tools that actually help you identify those patients who have no collateral ventilation and therefore are ideal candidates for this treatment. So we can physiologically measure the air that's coming out of the lung, and if you can empty the lobe completely, then you can use the device. So there still remain about 50% of patients with COPD emphysema that are not addressed with this current technology. And so part of our effort now is to identify or develop tools that will allow you to treat those patients. And that's kind of where we're putting our focus.
Thank you. Anyone who would like to go next?
Yeah, I can chime in here. So I think in ophthalmology, both for what Glaukos is doing as well as our peers in the space, I'm really excited about what's happening with sustained drug delivery, right? So I think that we're going to see a trend towards more and more products being developed for multiple different types of diseases, where rather than giving a patient, a drop or some other kind of medication at a regular cadence, you're going to implant a thing, right, one time, and then have that take the place of the medication for months or years. We've got one product called iDose, which is under development now, which does exactly that for glaucoma, right? So it's another sub-millimeter device that we anchor in the anterior chamber, which elutes over time a very potent pressure-lowering medicine that would take the place of those same daily drops. And I think you'll see more and more of that in our space across different therapeutic spaces or applications.
How long does that system last, the one that you just mentioned?
Oh, it's still we're still sorting that out, but early results are very, very I'd say impressive. And one year seems like pretty achievable, if not more. So we will learn more soon.
Sounds good. Okay, and Barbara or Frank, would either of you like to answer the question?
Yeah, I will go. So in the area of intraocular lenses, I think, PanOptix represents an incredible leap forward, but there is still some room to go. The next wave of innovation in this area would be to develop a truly accommodating lens that provides full range of vision at any distance and without any visual disturbance. Such an innovation is really considered in this area as the holy grail in intraocular lens design, as it will be restoring really focal accommodation to presbyopes. We are already working on this next generation of intraocular lenses at Alcon. Now, if I go in the area of ophthalmology, surgical ophthalmology, I think what excites me the most is robotic surgery. I mean, either cataract or vitreoretinal surgery. I think within the next 10 years, we're going to get there. Another area which is very interesting, of course, is the use of artificial intelligence and machine learning powered algorithms to leverage preoperative and postoperative patient data to improve their outcomes. For example, to better predict the IOL power that is going to be implanted in the patient eye when certain factors such as a history of prior refractive surgery like LASIK, PRK, may make the IOL power selection much less accurate. Also, I think the use of non-invasive therapies is something that is going to come and that is very exciting. For example, laser-based therapies to adjust the power of an IOL lens postoperatively, or to improve aqueous humor drainage to reduce intraocular pressure in glaucoma patients. So there are a lot of areas of excitement, fortunately, and I think we're going to see a lot of great advancements in the coming years.
Thank you very much. So Barbara, would you like to give your thoughts?
Yes, and I agree with what Frank said about the exciting advancements that are coming down the pike and in the area of intraocular lenses, including some unique designs and such, which may allow at some point in time for an easy replacement of lenses to optimize optical power. I think in the area of contact lenses, contact lenses, traditionally are widespread use for corrective means and such, but we're now seeing electronics embedded into contact lenses. So the smart contact lenses, the first one of the smart lenses was the Triggerfish, which was cleared for marketing a couple of years ago, that measures or monitors intraocular pressure. But we see contact lenses under development that are monitoring blood glucose and other ocular health parameters. And there's also a contact lens that in the area of light sensitivity, where they can embed electronics and they can control the amount of light. So it essentially, instead of being, as the artificial iris has a fixed pupil diameter, the smart lenses that are under development and the electronics can actually change the size of that diameter and do that and make that change dynamically in response to light. So I think those are some really interesting challenges where we see contact lenses, and then contact lenses are also being used as drug delivery devices and unique ways in which drugs can be embedded into those contact lenses. And then finally, I think the other areas that there's so much more that's being developed now in the area of the retina, so retinal surgery, but also gene therapy for macular degeneration and such, and where the genes are being developed now, the gene therapy and such, that where traditional therapy were the anti-VEGF injections, and the genes now are being programmed and can program so that they actually create these little anti-VEGF machines or manufacturers, so to speak, inside the eye for treatment of macular degeneration. So I think we're going to see more and more happening in the area of gene therapy and really targeted gene therapy.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think those are great answers. So let me open this up to questions that people would like to ask either from the audience or any of you to each other. There's a chat and other or people can just talk. I mean, ask from the audience or yourselves if for questions, since we have 5 experts here.
Actually, I've got a question for Frank, if it's okay.
Sure.
So the topic of AI, right, and machine learning, I totally agree with you. I think that's going to be more and more pervasive in ophthalmology and probably right all areas of MedTech. What do you think the top 2 or 3 applications are going to be in ophthalmology, in particular, in the near term for AI?
For AI, I think I see potentially three great applications. The first one is V1 had mentioned earlier on in cataract surgery, how you can improve the predictability of the lens power using preoperative and postoperative data from patients, especially in those cases when patients, they have had LASIK or other kinds of surgery prior to cataract surgery. And the current algorithms and formulas are not very good at predicting that. Another big area, of course, and you've seen that already, it is imaging of the back of the eye, the retina, right? In order to diagnose some diseases like diabetic retinopathy, or you can even for glaucoma now use AI to analyze visual fields and try to predict what is going to be the evolution of the visual fields within the next 5 years. So everything based on imaging, I believe, is going to be a major development for AI and machine learning. I also believe, imaging using, for example, real-time OCT technologies that would focus on the front or the back of the eye, and that would have computer-assisted intervention for both preoperative planning and intraoperative guidance will be the future with that. And before, I mentioned robotic. If we want to do robotic surgery, this kind of OCT guidance will be needed for robotic surgery. So these are, in my opinion, some of the three areas, but you can look at the literature and you find every month new applications for everything. So it's actually becoming a big part of the future, I believe. Do you agree with me?
Yeah.
I do, yeah. On the imaging especially, I think that's going to be just super pervasive. No, thanks for the insight. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'd like to add one more area to that too, and that's the use of real world evidence. I think we talk about post-approval trials and post-approval data that needs to be generated, especially with our devices and such, is that how do we use real world evidence? And I know there are some companies now that, and there's some initiatives with the American Academy of Ophthalmology with practices that have their electronic medical record systems online, so that real world evidence data can be extracted directly from those medical records. And I think we're going to see where real world evidence plays, hopefully changes the way that we function in a regulatory world and a clinical world, from at least in the post-approval process. So I see that as a major initiative in the future as well.
Indeed, and the good news is FDA is really active in that as well, and they are trying to help us leverage those real-world evidence data in the future to get approval more easily sometimes. So I think I agree with you, Barbara.
Yeah.
I think that's great. Yeah, I would just add, at MIT, we were just building a new college with $1 billion just to, train new people in artificial intelligence. And I also think it'll probably be useful in drug development too, to try to accelerate, look at structures that, structure function relationships for different molecules. I think could be very powerful as well. So I think that's a great question, great comments. Other questions that any of you'd like to ask each other or audience questions?
Yeah, I have a question for Desmond as a return.
Good.
So what is the next big breakthrough in the treatment of glaucoma 10 years from now?
Oh, 10 years is asking a lot.
5 years. 5 years from now.
Yeah, I think 5 years out, I would go back to the sustained drug delivery devices, right? I think if you look at the spectrum of glaucoma, right, and what we can currently do with drops, right, versus multiple drops versus an eye stent or other similar products, that is pretty good. And then there are other more invasive surgical approaches that you can also apply to more severe cases, right, which also work pretty well. I think if you could take a kind of best in class medicine, right, hyper concentrate that, put it in a little canister, right? And then over a period of time, elute that in a very effective way and remove from the patient completely that burden of adherence to the medication protocol. I think that'll be a real game changer, right? And I think if you tell someone, hey, you can come into my office, have this procedure done one time, and then you're good for, X number of months or years, I think patients will really appreciate that.
So you are thinking on the drug side. I was also thinking, what about a closed system like for diabetic patients where you can sense IOP and then you have a valve that can open the drainage for the aqueous humor such that you can control completely the IOP of your patient 24/7.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking 10 years, right, then yeah, I think devices like that could make a big impact. In that case, it's a matter of miniaturization, right, and how much functionality, because as you know, that space is real tight, right? How much can you pack into a little device that you can get the sensing, right, and the active therapeutic part of the functionality out of? But I mean, things only get smaller and smaller and more functional as we go on, right? So it's certainly possible.
There are other questions anyone would like to ask from either the audience or the panel? Well, I think you all have done a wonderful job. I really appreciate all. I think the sharing the experiences, I think everybody, learns a lot from that. And so I want to thank you all for taking the time. Before we break apart, I thought if we could take a look at the results of the poll. If they could put that up. So I guess it seems like a clear winner, the widespread use of patient-friendly digital and biosensor platform technologies that control or prevent the progression of major chronic diseases certainly finished first. And then I guess they're talking about second was effective and accessible vaccines for major global killers. I wonder how that would have, what the response would have been if COVID was added to that, but I didn't make up the poll. But any comments that any of you want to make on that?
We have a bunch of med tech, med device people in the audience.
Yeah, I guess maybe that's it. Maybe that's it. Well, anyhow, I just really want to thank all of you for this really fantastic presentations and great work that are going to help many, many people, many, many patients. So I just wanted to mention also that the webcast that we just did is viewable on the Galien Foundation's homepage. And also Thursday night, there's a forum with evening awards and the presentation of the 2021 Roy Vagelos Pro Bono Humanitarian Award, which will be given jointly to the CEOs from the companies that led the way in this year's vaccines and therapeutics to fight COVID. So again, I just want to thank you all. Really, it's just fantastic work and that you're all doing. And like I say, it's clearly helping many, many people, not just now, but for the years to come. So thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.